Hey guys, my name is Miss Castro, and today I'll be reading to you from Alan Gratz' Ground Zero, a novel of 9/11. Rashmina, right here, right now. 5, 6, 7, 8. Rashmina counted in English as she picked up sticks for firewood. 9, 11. No, she had missed a number. 10. Rashmina stood and straightened her back. It was early morning, crisp and cool. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, and Rashmina could see all the way to the towering mountain range that separated her home in Afghanistan from its neighboring country, Pakistan. The mountains were arid and brown with snow capped peaks. Down below, a green and gold patchwork of rice paddies and wheat fields and vegetable gardens lined a lazy brown river. It was September. Soon Rashmina realized with a pang of sadness it would be time for the harvest. Rashmina's parents would keep her home from school to help. Rashmina hated missing school. Taliban attack! Her twin brother, Passoon, cried, leaping out from behind the bush where he'd been hiding. Rashmina screamed in surprise, and the stack of firewood in her arms went flying. Passoon held a stick like a rifle and pretended to shoot at her. Cow, cow, cow! Rashmina shoved her brother with both hands. Passoon, you snake! Look what you made me do. Now I have to start all over. Passoon cackled at his own joke. I was just trying to help. See? He offered her his fake rifle. I brought you a stick. Rashmina snatched the stick from him. Some help, she said. How long were you waiting behind that bush? All morning, Passoon said, pleased with himself. You took forever to get here. Rashmina and Passoon were both thin, with round faces, brown skin, big brown eyes, and black hair. Passoon's hair was short and unkempt, while Rashmina's was long, carefully combed, and tucked under a black headscarf. Passoon was a little taller than Rashmina, but they looked more alike than different. How they lived was another matter entirely. As a boy, Passoon had time for games and practical jokes. His only chore was to take the goats up into the mountains to graze for a few hours. As a girl, Rashmina worked from the moment she woke up until she went to sleep at night. While Passoon had been lying in wait for her, Rashmina had been hauling water up from the river. There were also clothes to be washed, rugs to be beaten and stacked, floors to be swept, animals to be fed, food to be cooked, and every afternoon the 2 kilometer walk back and forth to school. Passoon didn't even do that anymore. He quit going to school a year ago. Passoon bent down and began collecting some of the sticks he'd made Rashmina drop. I heard you practicing your English, he told her. Their native language was Pashto, the language of the Afghan mountains. They both knew some Dari too, the language spoken in much of the rest of Afghanistan. Of the two of them, only Rashmina had kept up with her English lessons. Why? Passoon asked. What do you mean, why? I mean, why bother? Said Passoon. I'm learning English because I'm going to be a teacher, Rashmina told him. Be a teacher? Passoon cried. The man you marry is never going to let you work. Rashmina frowned. Passoon was probably right. In Afghanistan, women had to do what their husbands told them to, and most men told their wives they had to stay home and take care of the house and raise a family. Rashmina's school teacher was a woman, but she was from Australia and unmarried. I'll teach until I'm married, then, Rashmina said, but she knew that was a fantasy. Rashmina's parents had just arranged for her sister, Marzia, to be married to an older man when she turned 16 next year. When Rashmina turned 16 5 years from now, she'd be married off too. She would go right from school to her new home. Rashmina's parents had planned the same fate for Rashmina's eldest sister, Hia, but Hila had died before she could be married. Rashmina felt a rush of sadness at the thought of her sister, Isla, who'd been like a second mother to Rashmina and Passoon, who'd made up stories for them and taught them to read, who loved jumping out and scaring them and chasing them all around the house, pretending to be a mountain lion. Rashmina fought off the pain of remembering. Besides, she said now, turning back to Passoon, it's 2019. Everyone speaks English. Passoon scoffed. Darwish and Amman say that when the Taliban win and the Americans leave, nobody will care about speaking English anymore. Rashmina shook her head. Darwash and Aman were two foolish boys who were 3 years older than Passoon, and he followed them around like a baby chick. Darwash and Aman had left home last month, and everyone knew where they had gone. The same place all the young men went eventually, up into the mountains to join the Taliban. Talib meant student in Pashto, and the Taliban had begun as a group of men who had studied at traditional Islamic schools. The Taliban followed a very strict interpretation of religious law, and during Afghanistan's last civil war in the 1990s, they'd fought their way to power. Rashmina's mother and grandmother had told Rashmina horror stories about life under Taliban rule, how the Taliban beat men for not growing beards, massacred families, burned down schools, and put on public executions in the soccer stadium in Afghanistan's capital, Kabul. It had been even worse for women. The Taliban banned girls from going to school or having jobs, beat women who left their houses without a male family member, and sold girls into slavery. The American army had driven the Taliban out of poverty 20 years ago, but the Taliban were still around, hiding out in the mountains, right where Rashmina lived. And the American army was still here too, fighting the Taliban alongside the Afghan National Army. The Taliban had changed, though. They were far less organized now. Some of their fighters were still motivated by the Taliban's extreme interpretation of Islam. Others welcomed any excuse to drive the foreign invaders from Afghanistan. Some of them were just poor boys from mountain villages who were hungry and needed a job, but they all shared a hatred of the Americans and the American-supported Afghan government, and fought them both whenever and however they could. Passoon turned his back to Rashmina to pick up another stick, and Rashmina saw her chance for revenge. She worked little sticks between the fingers of each hand like claw and snuck up on Passoon. "Snow leopard attack!" she cried, and jumped on his back. Passoon screamed and dropped all the sticks he'd been collecting. Rashmina scratched at his neck with her makeshift claws, and Passoon fell to the ground. In seconds, they were tumbling and wrestling and laughing like they had when they were little. But Isla had died, and Marzia had been promised in marriage, and Passoon had started talking about joining the Taliban. At last, Passoon swept her knees out from under her, and Rashmina fell to the dirt beside him. They lay on their backs, panting and staring up into the cloudless blue sky, and Rashmina's hand found Passoon's. He didn't pull away, and Rashmina smiled. This right here, right now, was what Rashmina wanted most in the world. What had been slipping away from her bit by bit as she and her brother got older. If only she could go back in time to those days when she and Passoon had chased each other in the hills and gone swimming in the deepest part of the river and played hide and seek in the caves beneath their village. Rashmina wished she could capture this moment in a jar, preserve it in amber. Isla was lost to her, and soon Marzia would be married and gone, and Passoon would follow Darwish and Amani into the mountains. And Ramina? From their village around the mountain came the sudden sound of a woman's cry. Then Rashmina heard a man yell, "Open up!" Rashmina felt goosebumps on her skin. Passoon pulled his hand from hers, and they both sat up quickly. Something was happening in their village. Something bad. Passoon hopped to his feet and ran down the hill, and Rashmina hurried to follow him. They rounded the mountains and slid to a stop at the edge of the river. Afghan men were wearing green camouflage uniforms and carrying the automatic rifles. Soldiers from the Afghan National Army were pounding on doors in Rashmina's village, demanding to be let inside homes. And there were American soldiers with them, directing their movements. Rashmina gasped. Her village was being raided.